like best case scenario, we're going to get some modest tax cuts, which again would be good. Tax cuts are good, but it's just easy to see. Like there's, spending's going to go up because that's what's popular. Tax cuts are popular. However, the flip side to that is that if you're not willing to make spending cuts, you really don't have much room to tinker around. And if you're insisting on spending $4 trillion a year, you're not going to have the biggest tax cuts in American history. It's ridiculous. And of course, as people have always said, spending is the real tax. This is what Ron Paul's always made clear. Like, spending is the tax. As soon as they spend the money, it's essentially a promise to either tax it or borrow it or print it. If you print it, we're taxing you in a different way. We're just taxing the value of your dollar. And if we borrow it with a promise to pay it back later. And how do we raise the money later? Well, we tax you or we print it. So it's just current taxes or future taxes. So once you realize that the spending is the tax, the only answer is to cut spending. And if you're not going to do that, we're going to be stuck in this nonsense where it's, we're dealing with these little, cutting around the edges. Now, that being said, any tax cut is good. Anybody who gets lower rates, good for you. However, I did want to say this, okay? Look, I know I get accused of this at times, and I know a lot of libertarians get accused of this, of like being too married to a philosophy, and too much like, oh, you're living in this kind of like ideological world. And, let me just say this, okay? Some basic libertarian shit that I know a lot of the people listening already know, but it's never bad to brush up on some basics. And for some of our newer listeners and people who haven't listened to all the old archives, and maybe you haven't heard me make this, make this point, or just this basic libertarian shit, at least my brand of libertarianism. So, taxation is theft. I know that gets like old to hear. Even I kind of feel like I almost roll my eyes at this stuff, but it is. It is. And that's how you have to fucking look at this shit. It is theft. Now, like I was saying before, sometimes I'll get accused of being like too much of an ideologue or something like that. And Jordan Peterson, right, when we were playing that clip, someone who I have a tremendous amount of admiration for, but when we were playing that clip from Jordan Peterson, he basically said like, oh, this is the problem with libertarianism, and he compared it to like radical Marxism, is that, oh, it oversimplifies things too much. And in the same way as Marx would just, Marx would look at religion and say, it's oppressive. That's it. It's oppressive. And Jordan Peterson is sitting there like, really? You're just going to throw out all of the knowledge, all of the history, all of the comments on the nature of humanity just because it's oppressive? Like, okay, there are aspects that are oppressive, but there's also these other aspects of it, right? And same thing with, he would always, whatever, the proletariat versus the bourgeois, and Marx would just oversimplify things. And Jordan Peterson said something along the lines, I don't mean to mischaracterize him because I don't remember exactly the quote, but he said something along the lines of like, this is the problem with all of these ideologies. And it kind of bugs me when people say that, because it's almost like they're doing the same thing that they're accusing us of doing. You're oversimplifying things when you just say all these ideologies are the same. And it's a real easy position to just say like, well, I'm not an ideologue. I've heard a lot of people say this before, but it's like, well, I just think ideology is the problem, and like isms, that's the problem. All the isms. So libertarianism or Marxism, it's all just an ideology, all just an ism. But so my response to that would be like, okay, fine. I guess I am an ideologue to some degree, depending on how you define it. But and I guess I fall into an ism. Okay, well, how do you feel about abolitionism? How's that? Those guys were ideologues, right? And they were an ism. But that's what libertarians are, man. That's what we are. We are abolitionists. And it's such a simple, basic principle that there's no problem jumping in on the ism or being an ideologue for that, because the only thing we believe is that people should be free. That's it. That's it. And that's why abolitionism is one of the greatest things in human history. It's great. It's just like they should be free. Now, you could ask an abolitionist, like, what jobs should the slave have after they're free? I don't know. I don't care. They can do whatever they want to, but they should be free. We should end this institution that is slavery. That's the thing right there. Okay, so here's the heart of libertarianism, right? To me, as I see it. This is the very essence of what it is, okay? I'll start here. Do you believe in morality? Okay, do you believe in such thing as right and wrong? Now, if you don't believe in morality, and there are some people who don't, but it's a very small percentage of people, that's a separate question, and we could do a whole other show on that. I just don't have time right now to get into it. But existing in the world of politics, right? Everybody agrees on this. There's nobody in our spectrum, from Bernie Sanders to Donald Trump to even more extremes than that, from the far social justice warrior, college campus leftist, to the Richard Spencer alt-right guy, to the biggest libertarian anarchist in the world, like any person you could make, they all, it's implied in everything they say that they believe that something is right and something is wrong, and that morality exists. Okay? So, assuming you believe that morality exists, and all you need, like basic little things, is raping a child wrong? As soon as you say yes, you think that's wrong, then you're acknowledging that you do think there is right and there is wrong, okay? I'm not saying we have to, we completely agree on what is right and what is wrong. There are probably some basic things that are pretty much like, a lot of the stuff found in the 10 Commandments, we all kind of still agree are wrong. Not all of them, but, you can covet your neighbor's wife as much as you want to. But like murder is wrong, rape is wrong, torture is wrong, a lot of things like that we all kind of agree on. Now, if you acknowledge any type of morality, right, that there is right and wrong, by the nature of morality, you have to acknowledge that whether we call you government or the state, or whether we call you Rob or Dave, doesn't change a moral dynamic, right? Like, slavery, for example, the fact that it was the law of the land doesn't really have an effect on whether it's moral. And if some guy takes over government tomorrow and says slavery is legal again, it was just as immoral a day ago as it is a day later, right? Because the nature of what morality is something that's kind of larger than what's the whim of some person or people decide it is, right? So I think that's a pretty clear line there, right? So you can't be like, oh, this is horribly immoral, but now I put on a blue suit with a shiny badge, so it's not a moral issue anymore. So the basic libertarian position is that we're all human beings and we're all playing in the same rules of morality. So something that I would do, or Rob Bernstein would do, or a politician would do, are not different in terms of morality. They're not different. All right? So, that being said, if I were to say I have a cage in my basement and I'm going to throw you in that cage, I put a gun to your head and say I'm going to take you, or I'm going to send men with guns to grab you if you don't give me your money, and I'm going to throw you in that cage, what would that be described as other than theft? Right? I mean, what other possible answer could there be? Then that is theft. If the government opened a department of rape and said we're going to go around raping people, you wouldn't go like, well, that's the price we pay for civilized sex. No, it's fucking rape because the women aren't consenting and men are forcing them. These are morals. They're still the fucking same. You can't legislate any of that shit away. And if you go down that road where you can legislate this shit away, you've given up on morality, because all of the most horrifically immoral things in human history were all protected by laws. All of them.